Okay.
Let me know when you are able to see the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Kindly mute all the participants. Okay. Good evening, and thank you for your patience. We have been delayed by almost half an hour today. So let us start off our review of the last chapter, realization in the book Reality at Dawn by Babuji Maharaj. And this I've been highlighting time and again the way chapter is
You're breaking.
Structured one after the other. Is that clear? Is the audio clear?
No,
Yeah,
no,
better.
you're patchy. And also, maybe we missed the prayer. Sounds like you and Raghu brother did the prayer.
Better, brother, now. Go ahead.
Okay. So let us have a look at what Babuji is trying to convey us in this chapter of realization. He starts off by alerting us as to what should be the correct form of prayer. He says, just a minute, let me hide this. Kindly mute yourself. Huh? Yeah, so he says we hear almost everybody talking about God, soul, mystery, and things like that, and all metaphysical things. But if you try to check if anyone amongst them is a God realization person or is acquainted with him, you will say most probably we will find none among them. That's what he says. And he also highlights that the reason why we have all these feuds between different, religious sects or creeds or things like that is because of these beliefs and dogmas rather than actual practical realization and knowledge. He says they talk a good deal, but inwardly they might be no different than atheists, although they might be professing that they're following very religiously about all these things. And he says also that for majority of the people, God is one who can grant them things, when they are in distress or when they're having some kind of needs and wants. So he says it's a kind of utility of God is when they are in distress or misery. And they also expect him to attend to all their, troubles and remove them. And they basically pray for such wants only. And Babuji says it is really far from etiquette or the idea of true love and devotion when we pray to God for our wants. So that is something we have to be very clear about what should be the kind of prayer we should offer for God that we had a look at earlier. Then it defines what is true devotion and who is a true devotee. He says true devotees are those who love him not for any favor or worldly interest, but for merely love's sake. And they are always in a state of complete resignation to his will, that is, that state of surrender. And also, there is that perfect contentment and for all that is bestowed upon them. Whether they are good or bad or joyful or unpleasant, it doesn't matter. Joy or sorrow is meaningless to such people who are in that state of surrender. And everything is a boon because it is all coming from the beloved. So, such complete resignation and unquestioning attitude in all matters is the highest form of devotion. So he gives the full range, about where people are praying to God for their worldly demands and things like that. And also the other end of the spectrum is the true devotee who is in a state of surrender, and he talks about this kind of complete or highest state form of devotion. Raghu brother, can you mute all? So here he also says when he uses the term resignation, it doesn't mean that we should remain idle, doing nothing ourselves. Just a minute.
1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, brother. Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
So he says we should not remain idle, but do our part of the duty, both worldly as well as spiritual dimension related. And he quotes this often heard statement where people say, now God helps those who help themselves. It is a common saying, and that the Babaji says is literally also true. We are failing in our sacred duty if we do not exert ourselves to the fullest extent and discharge our responsibilities pertaining to both this world and to the next world. That's what he says. So, what is required to be borne in mind when we attend to work in this worldly domain is that we work in accordance with the will of God and feel contented with the results. That is the important thing. Whatever happens, we are having that state of acceptance and contentment, whatever it might be. So, when we come up to this level, we may rightly think ourselves to be true devotees of the Supreme Master and hence on the right path leading to reality. Is. So, this is a very important reminder for all of us that whatever happens, if that state of acceptance and contentment is there, then we are progressing towards this state of devotion. And he says reality is not a thing to be perceived through the physical organs of the senses, but it can only be realized in the innermost core of the heart. So this will ring a bell when we are discussing the concept of God. In the very first chapter, he says God is, for him, we seek for in the innermost core of our heart. So reality is again something which cannot be perceived through the physical organs of the senses, but can be realized or felt in the innermost core of the heart. So we have therefore to go deep into the mystery to solve it. So then he discusses this concept of Maya because lots of ideas are there regarding this concept of Maya. A lot of misconceptions are also there. And Babuji gives a very remarkably different take on this concept of Maya. He says we have in our mind an idea of this great universe, which is what we all know, this manifest universe. And the material manifestation of God is this universe. We look upon it as Maya or illusion to distinguish it from the unchanging absolute reality from which everything has descended. And people have tried to define Maya in numerous ways. And he says, maybe not, perhaps, without some kind of reasonable basis or foundation. But Babuji says Maya is really a godly power which has brought this existence into place, and the entire creation in its different forms and shapes is a result of this activity of Maya, and which also regulates its entire working. So Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, all of them is including in this. Entire creation in its different forms and shapes, it is also regulating its entire working. So Maya is really a godly power. That is the first thing to understand. And also, we are all the while surrounded by this great power. And its effect is visible in all phases of our activity. We are, he says, caught up in as if a kind of vortex. We are whirling around within this glossy sphere of Maya, clinging at times to one or the other of the objects in view. And we take it to be the reality. That is the unfortunate part. Because of our limited perception and the expansion of consciousness. So our senses, feelings, emotions, all of them also give the kind of hues and colors to and mold our actions accordingly. And we remain entangled in this snare of Maya without any hope of emancipation until we divert our attention towards the unchanging reality at the base or the root. So this is quite a different concept as far as what Babaji says. Most of the time we hear about Maya and say we have to somehow kind of know. For overcoming that, people advise many things, and they have a very different, many different connotations are there when we talk about Maya Jal. But here he says it's a godly energy which has brought this entire existence into place, in creation in different forms and others. So then we always wonder about at the base of all this, what is there? So he says for this limitless universe, we have to trace out the zero or base from which all planes of existence have come. And this vast circle of material manifestation, which is visible as which we can perceive, is a direct result of Maya, and it is unlimited, he says. So in it we go around and round with ceaseless motion, like the rim of a wheel, ever farther away from the center or the pivot. So just as every circle has a center, so this vast phenomenological manifestation that we see must have a center or a base. And if we are able to discover it, we may possibly find a clue for the solution of our problem. That's what he says. Also, he gives an analogy from mathematics where he says the whole science of mathematics rests upon the little base, the zero. And if you recall, this concept of zero is a wonderful gift for mathematics, the field of mathematics. It is given by our ancients, the ancient mathematicians from India. So for this limitless universe also, he says we have to trace out a zero or base from which all of this has evolved. And we saw this earlier in the discussion about, the march towards freedom or journey towards the center, which Babaji has described in terms of the 23 circles with mind region, the heart region, mind region, and the central region. So this analogy or this parallel, is beautifully fitting with the kind of description he gives in terms of the tracing the center for this entire manifestation and the multiple universes. He says each circle, if observed minutely, is in itself another smaller and finer circle which supports the next one. And as such, it must have another still finer center for it. And this process goes on ad infinitum. So in other words, each of the finer, smaller circles serves as the center of a bigger external circle. And usually what happens is that subtler planes of existence or dimensions support the slightly grosser ones. Always that is
ಎಷ್ಟು
the
ಚಂದ ಮಗುವೆ ಕೊಡು 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 ಚಂಡಿ ತೆಗಿಬೇಕು
reason. Kindly mute. So he says reason or imagination fails to trace out the origin or the end of all these circles. So obviously behind this solid material universe which we are able to perceive, finer, more subtler universes are there, which serve as the cause or the center of this outer universe. So there is this concept of multiple universes also. Again, for that finer circle, there must be another, and it goes on. That is what is represented by this diagram, where he is discussing different regions and dimensions of subtlety. So putting it another way, he says there may be thus innumerable circles, not just these 23, one after the other, around that unimaginable finest point or the center within. Each circle in turn serving as the center of the next outer circle. So what we have to do is to now trace our steps back from the present gross existence to the previous finer and finer, still finer forms of existence, up to the farthest limit of human approach. That means time of creation when we were in purest form. So our journey back to the center, it is again related to the process of creation, which is a often occurring theme in all the works of Babaji Maharaj, because everything is related to them. That is the philosophical foundation for this entire thing. He says in this present gross existence of ours, we are revolving around and around within the sphere of grossness. So our only hope is to push across or cut across all these towards the center of the root cause, crossing all these regions one after the other. And that is the essence of spiritual science, he says. So the essence of spiritual science is making this path and tracing our steps back to the origin. Root cause of the entire universe, from the finest to the grossest, is of course the innermost center or zero or base, whatever name you want to call it. He says you can call it Brahma or God also. So the next interesting idea is, he says, the human beings and the universe, there is a beautiful parallel. The composition of a human being is also exactly the same as that of the universe. Very interesting and a very profound observation with a lot of implications for that. When we say the composition of a human being is also exactly the same as that of the universe, he says the parallel is like this. As behind this solid external universe, there are innumerable others of the finer and still finer type. So behind this gross form of or physical form of ours, there are numerous finer and still finer forms of existence. So that is something which most of us are not aware of. We only limit all our attention to the physical outer form. And this we are familiar with. We discuss it in terms of the three bodies, the Sthula, Sukshma, and Karana Sharira. The Karana Sharira supports the entire, it is the base for entire existence. Also, it is discussed in terms of these 5 circles of Maya, then 11 circles of egoism, and 7 rings of splendor in reality at dawn, where we can actually understand what Babaji is talking about in terms of the circles and the finer or subtler ones supporting the entire external part of it. So this is also there in terms of the efficacy of Raja Yoga description, where he talks about these different regions, and also in terms of the 5 koshas. Each the Anandamaya or bliss kosha is the one which is of the subtlest, and proceeding outwards we have the Annamaya kosha of the physical form. So remember that behind this solid external universe, there are innumerable others of the finer and finer type. We are not aware of these dimensions till we come into this path of spiritual, anatomy kind of project. Then we slowly start discovering all these things with the help of a capable guide. So the outermost one is the physical or Sthula Sharir, behind which there exists the Sukshma Sharir, which supports this, and this is supported by the causal body or the Karan Sharir. Besides these 3 outer forms, there are innumerable other ones, but he says they are so fine and so subtle that thinkers do not call them as bodies as such, but only as fine coverings around the soul. That's what he says. This is for, because there will be the numbers will be huge if you have to call each one of them by name and give descriptions and things like that. And they are so fine and subtle, he says. So it is really very difficult to put a name to each one of them, which may be countless. So a daunting task. So he says, with all these innumerable forms, from the finest to the grossest, humankind is in existence in the material world as a true copy of the universe. A very profound and remarkable statement that, as a true copy of the universe, we are also existing. And if you recall, in one of the earlier chapters, Babaji says, we are here. It is not a matter of accident that we are here. The present human life, he says, a process. It as a result of a slow process of evolution. So this innermost center or zero of a person's existence and that of God's manifestation, he says, is really the same. So it follows that realization of God means the same as the realization of the self and vice versa. So that is why it's also called self-realization. Because of the philosophy supporting that, what we saw in the earlier slides about the composition of the human being and also the subtler ones, subtler regions or planes of existence supporting the grosser ones. So when you proceed towards the innermost center or zero of the person's existence means we are proceeding towards the innermost core where we are going to, towards the reality of the presence of God or divinity. And that is what we try to realize. So all of this universe came into existence from that original same point, zero, through the process of evolution. So we share the same process. Similarly, human existence too developed from the same point. This we are aware of. We discussed this both in terms of process of creation in the commentary of 10 maxims or in other works, as well as in reality dawn at the earlier chapter. So he says, before creation, the only thing in existence was the root cause or the base or the ultimate substratum. And the whole universe, as we see it today, was merged in it in the subtlest form, everything losing its individual identity. So in the most subtlest form, everything was merged in this root cause. And then what happens? It is like, he says, the center, it is like the tiny seed of a tree. It has that potential to give birth to a massive tree. So it includes within itself the whole of the universe in the subtlest form, the center in the seed form. The so extremely an abridged form of the same expanded universe that we see today. So does the center, the latent motions, and the entire creation in the subtlest form all combined together when the time of creation came. And the time everything began to assume a form of existence. Human beings also assume their individual existence. So all this is given in this description is given in many of the books of Babaji Maharaj. This process of creation, recurring theme. The first, problem we have is the consciousness of individuality when we separated from the source. So this was the first covering also in the composition of humankind. Further additions continued one after the other. Egoism began to develop and ultimately assumed the present grosser form. It is happening as a result of the workings of the mind. Senses and faculties begin to contribute their own share towards this grossness. So actions of the body and mind led to the formation of samskaras. And finally, we know people exist in the grossest form consisting of the outer physical body and the subtle bodies of the coverings. That is the current situation for all of us. So then what is to be done as a solution to proceed towards the center, the journey towards the center? He says there are many ways and means which we discussed. Now he talks about the ancient tradition of sadhana chatushtaya, for the process generally adopted for the purpose is classified into this sadhana chatushtaya, and also it is involving these karma, jnana, upasana, and these are the ones which form the basis for all actions and approaches in many religions and creeds as well. So these four elementary means of sadhana chatushtaya adopted for the purpose are almost same everywhere, he says, which comprise viveka, discrimination, vairagya, shat sampatti, the six sampattis, and mumukshutva. So these are the four elements of sadhana chatushtaya. And the first of them is viveka, discrimination. We see many things in this world, but when we think of their existence, we find that they are changeable. There is that transitionary aspect of this. And that is, we also understand that it is as a result of different forms of Maya, as we generally call them. So this transitory nature is something which puzzles us. So we are inwardly, induced to go deeper into the solution of this, and then find that we have to trace out the cause or the root cause for all these visible things that are there as a result of Maya. So worldly objects thus begin to lose their charm when we are inwardly inclined, and in one way we slowly become progressively unattached to all of them, because our attention is diverted from these transitory things to that which is unchanging or eternal. That is the first step we take. And then vairagya or renunciation is the second of this traditional approach of sadhana chatushtaya. And this brings us to the state of vairagya or renunciation when we divert our attention from the worldly objects. And then this is a state which is also brought about by other causes as well. It can be, for example, when we are fed up with worldly objects after indulging in them to our fullest possible extent, we sometimes begin to feel revulsion or inward repulsion. And also it is possible when we are, betrayed and be pricked by treachery and faithlessness of the world, or we might feel disgusted and wisely, inwardly averse to so many other things which are happening. Or a feeling of dissatisfaction and detachment also develops as a result of all this when we are in a state of bereavement, when we lose the dear and dear ones. So these are all the occasions when we have a temporary state of vairagya. And he says it is seldom genuine and lasting. It soon disappears when the outer circumstances of the environment change. So this state of vairagya, which is induced because of all these external causes, is temporary. So this vairagya, he says the real feeling of vairagya is something very different. And he relates the story of Sant Kabir, where one disciple wanted to meet him, and he goes to his village, and he was told, the entire party has gone to cremation ground. And then when he inquires how to identify Kabir, they say when all of them are proceeding towards the cremation ground, there is a halo that you can see in the face of everyone. But while returning, only Sant Kabir will be having this halo. So that is actual permanent state of vairagya as opposed to the temporary state. That's what he is highlighting in that. Only the halo around Sant Kabir's face would remain glowing all through with equal luster. That's what he says. So the feeling of vairagya in the real sense with lasting results can only be developed after thorough cleaning and due moderation, clearing of the entire system, and moderation is there. But the Vedantins also practice vairagya in a different way. They take a very different approach. They force their imagination to believe that everything they see is Maya or Nitya. Hence it is transitory or false, and conclude that reality at the bottom is or Brahman, which is unchanging. So they apply the willpower and to strengthen this thinking, so much so that they get habituated and they try to go away from this, shunning everything. And it in a course of time, after a long process, they might also have some kind of modicum of result. That's what he says. The effect is mostly merely and external, he says. It may, however, after long and continued practice, possibly reflect somewhat inwardly. That's what Babaji is a very, very minimal effect. Similarly, Viveka, actuated by mere force of imagination without this touch of practicality, has now sound base. It's not something natural. It is not as a result of purification of the system or moderation. So he says a close study of the subject will show that really Viveka and Vairagya are not the means or sadhana, but only the result of some means. So it's a clear departure from the traditional view of sadhana chatushtaya, where Viveka and Vairagya are the first two steps of the sadhana. Here, Babaji says they are the results of certain means adopted or sadhana, and it is not a sadhana itself. They are results of the sadhana. So, Viveka and Vairagya are states of mind. Please note that they are states of mind developed at different stages by constant practice of certain yogic sadhanas, such as remembrance, devotion, and love, and so on. This we saw earlier. So, this is a resulting condition of the mind which happens over a period of time because of the practice of yogic sadhanas. So he says Viveka in the true sense never develops unless the senses are thoroughly purified. And it can happen only when the mind itself is properly regulated and disciplined. And egoism is assuming its more purified state, or the state of humility is developing. It is that it is then Viveka is in fact the result of practices followed in order to bring about the desired results. Similarly, he says the Vairagya, the second sadhana of Vedantins, is the result of Viveka, where we are able to, because of the discrimination that we have, we are able to make correct choices. And they are thus the stages of elementary attainment, he says. Otherwise, if you sequentially take up as per the old traditional system, they spend a huge amount of time in trying to develop these stages of Viveka and Vairagya. And erroneously, a lot of people think Vairagya means shunning everything and take up the path of sannyasa also. So these he says are elementary attainments in this and in yoga, and not the sadhanas are means of attainment of the higher stages. So Viveka and Vairagya are states of mind and they are not sadhanas. That is the most important thing to remember. So what next comes in this sadhana chatushtaya is Shat Sampatti. So our system of heartfulness starts from what is known as the third sadhana of the Vedantis, the sadhana chatushtaya, and this is the Shat Sampatti, 6 spiritual attainments. They are called that's why it is called as Shat Sampattis. So we don't take up Viveka and Vairagya as separate sadhanas, and they are left aside to be developed automatically by seekers during their progress as a result of the practices that are taken up. So what we do is we start from what is known as the third sadhana of the Vedantis, the Shat Sampattis. And if you see the entire, hierarchy of the sadhana chatushtaya and then the Shat Sampattis, and where heartfulness or the Sajmark system of practice comes in, it is like this. So we start with these are the results of practices and not sadhanas themselves. Although they are reflected as sadhana chatushtaya, we take up Shat Sampatti or the 6 sampattis. Of that shama or molding of or regulation of mind. That is why we take up straight away dhyana. And in this, there are 2 paths of shama. One is the abhyas or pravritti path, the positive way of doing. And we try to attain this regulation of mind through Ashtanga Yoga. And there is also this vairagya or nivritti path or renunciation, which is the negative way, where we are trying to shun everything. So in this abhyasa or pravritti path, all these are there, the 8 steps of Ashtanga Yoga. And we start with Dhyana, the 7th step of Ashtanga Yoga. Again, here we don't individually take up all of them, but they are taken up in a holistic or integrated way when we do Dhyana aided by yogic transmission. So this is the beautiful integration that is achieved in this heartfulness system, because yes, if you read Whispers, he does a lot of research and he has distilled all the best part of it and then developed the Sahaj Mark system. The Ashtanga Yoga, of course, has these 8 Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. And these are also known as Samyama, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi together. So we start with Dhyana, the 7th step in Ashtanga Yoga. But please remember, all the steps of Ashtanga Yoga are taken up when we take up Dhyana and also the 10 maxims, the lifestyle. So that is how we have to look at it. Then briefly, Babaji Maharaj discusses each of the Shat Sampatis, starting with Shama. The first of these, the Sampati Shama, pertains to the peaceful condition of the mind, leading to a state of calmness and tranquility. It's the first requirement. And when we practice this, he says Viveka and Vairagya automatically follow, which is understandable, easily understandable, isn't it? When we are in that peaceful state and there is that great sense of equanimity, we are able to respond rather than react. So Vairagya, in the sense of non-existence of things, is a very difficult process, he says. So we adopt a positive way of approach, where we try to attach ourselves to something of a higher cause. He says, in the process where we are trying to take a Vairagya in the sense of non-existence of things is very difficult, because we have to take up a negative course and discard everything else, rejecting everything that comes to our view. But if we take up a positive view and accept one thing only as real, and sticking to it wholeheartedly, everything else automatically, naturally drops off. Our attention is all the time diverted toward the higher purpose, and everything falls into the background. So much, much easier. And by, he says, we will become unmindful of them. That is the process of Shama, and it is comprising all these Ashtanga Yoga steps. Consequently, our attachment with them will gradually begin to wane and disappear altogether when we gain this state of Vairagya, which is so easily achieved, he says. Just a minute, let me hide this. Okay. So, Shama, please remember, it pertains to that peaceful condition of the mind leading to a state of calmness and tranquility. So Babaji Maharaj, after all his research, he found everything is now starting from mind. He says the first thing we have to do is regulation of the mind. So he says primary thing in yoga is proper regulation of the mind. Everything else, like a jigsaw puzzle, everything falls into place if we do this first. So he says mind is ever restless and we have to first regulate that. And also, everything good or evil originates from the mind. So it is the mind alone that governs all our feelings, emotions, impulses, everything, all actions, everything. So then this is very elaborately dealt with in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the different tendencies of the mind. Here, briefly, Babaji Maharaj has given a very brief outline of these 5 tendencies of the mind. The thinkers, he says, have classified the tendencies of the mind into 5 categories called Shipta, Moodha, Vikshipta, Ekagravritti, and Niruddha. So we will have a look at what each of them means. The first of these is known as Shipta. It is a disturbed state of mind, and it includes all feelings such as hunger, thirst, anger, sorrow, desires for wealth, fame, so on and so forth. We are all familiar with this state of mind known as Shipta. The second is Moodha, and it includes all those tendencies that promote sluggishness, idleness, or indolence, or sloth. So it is again very clear to all of us, Moodha. Third is Vikshipta, or the tendency that drives the mind away from sacred thoughts, where all these pleasure-seeking activities are there. And it brings about haunting of numerous irrelevant ideas when we sit for meditation also. That is also vikshipta. Fourth is ekagravriti. Slowly now we are tendencies that makes our attention fixed upon one thing only. So slowly from Kshipta, Mudha, Vikshipta, we come to the state of concentration or Ekagravati. And the last one is the state of Niruddha, which is the tendency that brings the mind to a perfectly self-contained state, free from all complexities and disturbances. That is what is the state of mind we should strive for all the time. So, very briefly discusses each of these aspects of Ashtanga Yoga, which is part of Shama. We saw these, the Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha are the six Shampati, Shat Sampatis. And start off with Shama, which is, he says to achieve this last stage of Niruddha, stages I were advised, taking up the Ashtanga Yoga path, and that comprises all these Yama, Niyama, and we are familiar with that. So we start with Dhyana, the seventh step of Ashtanga Yoga, fixing our mind on this point, and we are aided by yogic transmission, and we do our practice. He says also the previous steps are not taken up separately, but automatically they come into practice as we proceed along with meditation under the guidance of the master. So that is the reason why we save a lot of time and labor by adopting the heartfulness approach. Otherwise, think of the time we have to spend if you take up all these in a sequential manner and spend time on trying to achieve one by one. Similarly, a lot of emphasis is these days on asana and pranayama, which people think is actually yoga. So that is another unfortunate misconception. So in short, we start our practice from Shama, the first of the six sampatis, or the third of the sadhana chatushtaya, Viveka, Vairagya, Shat sampatis, and Mumukshutva, and devote all our attention to proper molding of the mind and regulation of the mind, which is again accomplished easily by the help of yogic transmission under the guidance of a capable master. That is Shama. So then he says, this is again people view in terms of karma, jnana, upasana, and all these things, and he says they're not really different, but are closely interrelated. They all exist together in one and the same state. So the example he gives is control of the senses and indriyas, Dhamma, follows automatically when we fix our mind on one thing and one alone, which is reality. Generally, most of the sages follow this course. However, a few of the sects attempt an approach to Shama through the practice of karma or action. Others through upasana or devotion or bhakti. There are others still who set aside both of these and proceed through jnana or knowledge. In fact, he says the stages of all these three are not very different, but they exist together. The example he says is in upasana or bhakti, controlling of the mind is karma, the controlled state of mind is upasana, and its consciousness, the awareness of that is jnana, knowledge. When one takes up this path of jnana yoga or knowledge, the process of thinking is karma, staying on the thought out object is upasana, and the resultant state is jnana. So in karma yoga, or when we take that approach, he says the resolve to act is karma, the process of bringing it into practice is upasana, and consciousness of the achievement is jnana. So very intricately, and they are interrelated, and all of them are taken up together. They exist together. That's what he is highlighting in the time of practice. Thus, he says, in our system, training is taken up with all of them being taken up together and most efficiently, creating effectively and automatically the state of Viveka and Vairagya in the true sense. And also is very emphatic when he says, no practice is really of any avail if it does not naturally result in Viveka and Vairagya. See, this is something very, very strongly is putting it, saying that practice is useless if it doesn't naturally result in Viveka and Vairagya. And the real form of Viveka is when we begin to realize our own defects and shortcomings at the bottom of our hearts and feel repentant for them. This is what we do in our prayer. When the discrimination dawns upon us. So then this, after this Shama and Dama, we come to Uparati, which is the third Sampatti of the Shat Sampattis. Uparati means withdrawal, self-withdrawal. So in this state, we are completely free of all desires, even those pertaining to the next word. Very, very important thing to note. In the state of Vairagya and Uparati, there is a difference. In Uparati, we are free of all desires, even pertaining to those of the next world. We are not charmed or attracted by anything in the world, and our minds are all the time centered on the real alone. It also differs from the state of Vairagya in the sense that Vairagya produces a feeling of aversion for worldly objects. There is a kind of negative connotation. Whereas in the Uparati state, both attraction and repulsion are absent. So very, very higher, elevated state. So he says Vairagya is really the incomplete form of this nobler and higher state of Uparati. At this stage, our mind and senses and indriyas are all thoroughly purified. We begin to feel fed up with all external things and dissociate from them, thinking them unworthy of our attention. So that is why he says we are free from the effect of attachment, and our even comforts of the paradise have no charm for us. Then after Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhana are taken up for discussion. Titiksha is the state of fortitude. At this stage, we are perfectly satisfied with what is allotted to us by God. We have no feeling of injury or insult or condemnation or appreciation. We are in a state of real great deep contentment, state of fortitude. Shraddha, we had a lot of this. We had in the previous chapter very elaborate discussion about this Shraddha, which is a very high attainment, Babaji used to call. So it is a very different from the preliminary state of artificial faith, and we have dealt with it in the chapter Shraddha. The last one of these Shat Sampatis is Samadhan. It is a state of self-settledness to the will of Master, without even the consciousness of it. So this is again very important to note. We are in that state of surrender without even that awareness. We are in a state of self-settledness to the will of the Master without even the consciousness of it. And at this stage, we are perfectly devoted to the great Master without any thought besides. Beautiful state of surrender, that is Samadhan. So these are the 6 or Shat Sampatis: Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhan. Lots of questions come from this chapter in the exams. Then the last bit is Mumukshutva in the Sadhana Chatushtaya. So please remember Viveka, Vairagya, Shat Sampatis, which we discussed now earlier. Then the last in the Sadhana Chatushtaya is Mumukshutva. He says, little remains now to be accomplished when we come to this stage, except to develop that close association with the absolute reality and actually merging in that state of non-entity. So what we need to remember is, it might look a bit too technical, but remember, sadhana chatushtaya comprises of those four sadhana or practices of achieving something. Then of them, Shat Sampati is the third sadhana. Then in that, the first of the sampatis is Shama. Then we take up the Abhyasa or Pravritti path, which comprises the Ashtanga Yoga, and Dhyana is part of Ashtanga Yoga. So that is the sequence. That's why I've highlighted it again. So just an animation we have. Sadhana Chatushtaya, the Shat Sampattis of that Shama, of that the Abhyasa or Pravritti path. Then we have this Ashtanga Yoga, and this is Dhyana. Then this is where we start our system of heartfulness, and under this system we have also the additional most important factor of yogic transmission. So this is something you have to spend some time on to try to remember these detailed aspects. We also discussed, after a brief discussion of Viveka and Vairagya, which Babuji says are not actually part of any sadhanas, but as they are results of sadhana. What we do is, starting from Shat Sampattis, we also had a look at Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhan. Mumukshutva is something where we are pretty close to, the higher stages where things are there in place. So please remember this and spend some time. Also, as part of Dhamma, we had a look at these 5 states, tendencies of the mind, starting from Chitta, Mudha, Vikshipta, Ekagravritti, and Niruddha, where we are the mind is in a very regulated state, let us say. Then these 3 states of Samadhi are well known, or the first is like, Pashanatulya, where we are lost or drowned. Our senses and feelings and emotions are temporarily in a suspended state, as if we are in a completely dead state for the time being. We resemble as if we are in a dead slumber, unconscious of everything. The second form of samadhi is that where we are deeply concentrated and we do not feel actually drowned in it. So he says it might be described as a state of consciousness within an unconscious state. Apparently, we are not conscious of anything, but still consciousness is present within, though in a shadow form. The third is, of course, the state of higher one, the Sahaja Samadhi. This is the finest type, he says. In this state, we are busy with our work, our minds are absorbed in it, but at the innermost core, we are all the time in the remembrance of the real. We are settled in that real thing. So, let me see what is the time. 9:30. Raghu brother, when do you want me to stop? We have to make allowance for some questions also, no? We have come halfway, I think.
If we have come halfway, I think we can probably pause it here, and then we can take the other half in the next session.
There is not much. Actually, as per my slides, 50. We are 43. Actually, we have covered more than half. I didn't realize. We have another 7 slides to go, then we can come back.
That's okay. Otherwise, okay.
But this will take much more time. Let us pause here for questions.
No problem.
So you can come back and recap.
No problem.
Okay.
So you can just take the screen off, and then we'll.
Yeah. Let me do that.
Okay. So
Okay.
let's begin. 1 or 2 minutes of pause.
There's a lot of content. Suddenly, Babuji compresses so much of technical information into this chapter, The in the earlier chapter, it is a very sedate pace, we can say. Suddenly, it just pumps us with so much of information in this.
So last 10 overs of the one-day cricket match.
Slog overs.
Exactly. So that's what seems to be happening.
Yeah, we have some hands raised.
So nobody wants to take a pass. They're already ready to fire.
They have waited very patiently for half an hour. That's why didn't want to take too long today. You can conclude. So what
Okay.
I thought was in the next session we'll cover remaining part of it and a little bit about emblem and other things. My vision.
Okay. Go ahead, sister. Madhuri sister.
Madhuri.
Yeah, good evening, brothers. So, Viveka, Vairagya are the results of the practice. Now, after hearing this session, I felt even Dhamma, Titiksha, Shraddha, Samadhan, they are also the result of the practices because that much of faith, that much of self surrender to the master, will of the master. So, so everything apart from Shama and Dhyana, everything is the spiritual attainments only then. Even Mumukshutva also.
The
Yeah.
difference is the earlier in the traditional thinking, they identified Viveka and Vairagya as separate processes, to be followed, and then the result comes as a result of following those processes. What you refer to, the other ones, Shamadama and of the six sampattis, they are to be attained by following or taking up certain yogic practices. They are results of certain yogic practices. There is no doubt about it. But Viveka and Vairagya are not separate processes, but as a result of something we follow.
But this is a very important question that you asked. Now, that highlights the importance of practice. Now, most of the time, we actually don't give as much importance to practice as we want to kind of to know about things. The tendency of the mind is to know things.
Yeah.
But then the real knowledge actually comes in as a result of the practice. And then it's only when it comes as a result of the practice that it's actually ours. Till it comes out of our own practice, the knowledge that we gain is always second hand. It is somebody else's experience and that we gain as knowledge. Now that includes masters.
Yeah.
Even masters' experience is a knowledge as far as we are concerned, it's a second hand knowledge. So it's only when we make the knowledge first hand by experience that actually it becomes ours. So this is very, very important about, so wherever Daji goes, he keeps emphasizing about practice.
Yeah.
There is no substitute for practice. Remember one thing, master has become master after having done the practice over n amount of periods of time and done the sadhana and experiencing different states. Right? Now, if we, Daji keeps saying that everyone can become master like. Babaji says we don't create disciples, we create masters. What do they mean by that? It is just that if we follow the same process with the same agility, with the same craving, then we are also likely to reach the same stage that they are at. In other words, the journey is always individual. It is, in a way, it's a paradox. The journey is individual to get over the individuality. That is the paradox. Okay. So just remember that. And that is why in the examination also, almost 50 to 60% of the marks are related to your practice. Now, if you are doing practice well, one of the feedback that I got today morning after the satsang in Manushankari is that the many of the people who actually conduct the exams, they were saying that quite a few abhyasis read about the practice and don't do the practice. When they don't do the practice regularly, but they just by heart and actually come and write about the practice, they will always have a lack of clarity. What will happen is if you read about the practice and practice it, you will get a lot of queries, you will get a lot of uncertainties, lack of clarity. And then obviously you will check with your preceptor or you will check with some other people, and then over a period of time get that clarity and then start doing the practice easily, correctly. Then when they ask you things about practice in the exam, it just comes out automatically because anyway you're doing it. You just need to write what you're doing. That's all. If you're not practicing and then if you're not writing, going to the nuances of the practice, many of the times people in the examination error. For example, today I just had the people who were correcting the question paper. So I just had a talk to them in the afternoon. And they said some of the elementary questions that they have actually made mistakes in, they have not correctly identified the B point. And the person said, rather than do the B point in, so you have to go one finger down and then four finger to the left, no? According to Daji's method. No, rather than say that one finger horizontally, they have written one finger vertically. So some of these nuances, lack of clarity, now that is what they will miss. And some people have actually missed on what is the role of B point. See, many times we assume that people know quite a few things. But then remember, it is always an individual journey. Each one of us have to learn it for our own sake, for our own journey. Okay. Now, just because we are in a group, now we cannot assume that everyone is speaking at the same pace. It's not possible. So each one of us have to devise our own mechanism, do our own self-study, because at the end of the day, the journey is individual. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Lot of silly mistakes. And the examiner said, they were correcting the paper. They said, people who have done well in the practice part, they have erred on the other side, in the open book section. People who have done well on the open book section, they have erred on the practice side. So overall, they were saying the results are like very, she said, a very mixed bag of results. So just keep that in mind, not to assume, especially some of the basics, we need to be very clear about it and we should get it right straight away. Okay. And the other thing that she said is that many people write examination in a handwriting that they cannot read. So she told me that if I'll send you two pictures of copies of the paper, you can just let me see whether you can actually read what they have written. And I think this applies to all languages, whether it's English and then Kannada. So I was just telling her, I don't know how many people can read my language. So whether I will be actually qualified to say this, but I have to say this. I have no other choice. So you have to practice. You know the doctor's language. Nobody can read except the pharmacist. So we have a secret contract with the pharmacist. So, but the trouble is, if we write the examination, the corrector is not able to, evaluator is not able to write or read our answers legitimately, then it's quite likely that we might know the answer, we might not actually get the marks for that. So, one of the things that they have said in Telangana is they have asked all SNP candidates to practice writing 2 pages every day. Every day, some 2 pages. You just
Yeah.
write it, it will increase your pace, it will increase your legitimate way of writing. So please practice that. So this is coming from the examiner who is actually correcting the papers. So please incorporate this into your daily routine. Okay.
Not only
And
that, writing. Yeah,
you can do it in such a way that you are practicing whatever you are anyway supposed to read. For example, if you're going to read about Shet Sampati, just write it down. In that way, I think your handwriting also will be pretty good.
The important thing is once you write, your recall also will be better, memory and recall.
Exactly. Okay.
Nirmala sister.
What is the difference between pratyahara and uparati? Inner withdrawal versus self-withdrawal.
Uparati, what we saw, is a state we are free of desires and also that withdrawal is there. Pratyahara is an intention where we are going inwards and then we are going towards dharana. It is what master calls the tipping point, like, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama are in a different domain. We start with pratyahara, where slowly, we are going towards the actual, let us say, the inner journey. So that starts with the intention, he says, where he discusses this in the Heartfulness magazines. Each of these are discussed. So this is the starting of our journey towards the inquiry, and everything is towards now. Attention is turned inward, pratyahara. So where the Sanskrit etymology, if you say, it is a kind of what do you call? I'm not getting the words for that actually.
For the tortoise.
Yeah, the tortoise example is given. That is kind of kavacham. It withdraws itself into, so that it is able to protect itself. That is the standard example given for pratyahara, where you are collapsing and you are withdrawing inside. Uparati again is a result of all these yogic practices. It is again a state that is arrived at, and it is beyond also vairagya. Vairagya is where it's a kind of incomplete form, he says. Vipariti is higher, where you have neither attraction nor revulsion for others, all these other things. Whereas in vairagya, you might have the negative connotation, that of revulsion for worldly things.
Both seem to be withdrawal. I mean,
Both are withdrawal.
there's a fine difference between them. It's not very clear.
Yeah, it's
I
a
mean,
nice question. Yeah, definitely both are withdrawal, but pratyahara is part of the Ashtanga Yoga part, where we are taking up that as a process. Uparati is a state which you arrive at as a result of certain yogic processes. Uparati is not a process.
it's a result.
Yeah. It is a state of mind, he says, Uparati. That is why this is one of the Shat Sampatis. And how do we arrive at Uparati is not something we practice, isn't it? So it's a nice question actually. Both have this inherent sense of withdrawal, self-withdrawal, that is there.
Okay.
Whereas in Ashtanga Yoga, each is a process. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pratyahara, Dharana also. The Sankalpa we take before we start off meditation. Then Dhyana. Samadhi again is a result of all this, the culminating part.
Okay, thank you, brother. But it's such a long process when you see this, and when you know that you have not reached anywhere. Okay.
No, see, Babuji Maharaj's fantastic or brilliant discovery is that he has crystallized and compressed all these elaborate processes where people are taking up in a sequential manner, one by one, very difficult and arduous path. He has compressed everything into just dhyana, the seventh step in the Ashtanga Yoga, and all others are falling in place because we are straight away going to the root cause. That is the mind. That's what he says. You regulate and moderate, everything else will fall into place automatically. Viveka develops, Vairagya develops as a result of this.
Okay.
Of course, the unique factor is the yogic transmission. So this is a great distilling of everything that is there in the extant systems. Yeah, you had another question, I think.
Sorry, one just small clarity. If this is the right view, brother, Uparati is more the attitude we are developing with the disinterest that we have with the external um, external attractions or whatever, right? And Pratyahara is the practice or the technique that we follow to attain Uparati, like the turtle example of.
Specifically, the Pratyahara is not specifically aimed at Uparati. Uparati is bereft of both attraction and revulsion. There is no such, we don't have that problem of vairagya in this. And also there is a kind of inherent contentment. Unless that is there, we will not have that state, isn't it? Whereas pratyahara is an intention to get to that thing, and it is a process that we follow. That is correct. Slowly we might get to the stage of uparati as a result of pratyahara, then followed by other steps of
So,
Ashtanga Yoga.
so Uparati is the state we attain, and the Pratyahara is the technique that we follow.
So Pratyahara is an enabler for the condition of Uparati. You can just make a note of that.
Yeah.
But in a way, although it's an enabler, if you look at the concept as such, it's more related to the Vairagya.
Yeah.
Because
Vitraya, actually. Yeah.
in Vairagya, there is the aversion towards the objects of the world. In here, you don't have either attraction or aversion. Both are not there. It's kind of a neutral state.
Yeah.
In other words, you are in a natural state. Like a child, which is in a natural state. It is neither attracted to this or that. It's kind of okay to go with the flow, so to say.
Anyway,
Okay.
it's a nice question from Sister Nirmala, which highlights this and a very fine aspects of this.
Thank you, brother.
Other way of looking at Pratyahara is that there are quite a few things Daji has explained. Pratyahara can also be split as Pratyahara.
Yeah.
So normally, the ahara or the food that we take is the experiences that we get from the outside objects. That is our food, day-to-day food. Everything that we do in this world is that only. Whether you take outside external food in the form of food or you deal with external objects, the external things are the food that we take into the mind, into the subtle body, and that we process it. At a physical level, we take that physical food. At the mental level, we take the mental objects. Okay, that is the usual ahara. In pratyahara, we actually desist from taking those aharas. In other words, we withdraw our mind from these aharas. Now we become ready for a ahara of a different nature. What is the ahara of a different nature? The ahara which is present internally. Now we don't want to look because the attention is now turned inwards. So when the attention is now turned inwards, we are ready to take the food from inside. Now the question comes, what is there inside? That is where the spiritual level of existence we actually become aware of, and all the conditions that you get in the spiritual progress are the ahara that you are taking from inside. That enables your growth now. So that is pratyahara. You become aware of the spiritual level of existence, and you also become aware of the food that is being given. Daji many times has described that the transmission is a food for the heart or the soul.
Cool.
So when the food is given to the soul, certain conditions open up in the heart. Now those conditions now become our, what do you say, food. Both the transmission and the conditions that open up secondary to the transmission, they are now the internal food that we start grasping. But for that, the attention needs to be turned inwards. It's only when the attention is turned inwards that we pass through the initial stage where you have aversion to the, when you say aversion, lack of interest towards the outside objects. Now that is the vairagya. Then if that now becomes your natural state, neither you are actually attracting anything nor you are having any repulsion about the external objects. That then naturally leads to uparati.
Uparati. Pratyahara is a kind of preparation that we are having. We are doing to imbibe the food for the soul, prana, pranasya pranaha, the yogic transmission.
So remember,
We are
there are
rejecting other things. Yeah.
three levels of existence, three levels of food.
Yeah.
So you have physical existence, you have physical food. You have mental existence, you have mental food. And you have spiritual existence, and transmission is the spiritual food for the soul. So, like we require food for our growth and health, we also require spiritual food for our spiritual growth and spiritual health. Okay, they go hand in hand. The health and spirituality go hand in hand. So please have this. There are two sides of the same coin. Most of the people think that health is separate and spirituality is separate. No, every aspect of the things that we do for health is good for spirituality. Everything that we do for spirituality is actually good for health.
That's why Master talks about swasthya. which is encompassing all these things. Next, Vasuki Kashyap.
Brother, it's more of theoretical question. Do we need to practice those diagrams, rings and all? Because just now Raghu brother mentioned about point B location, whether they ask us to draw, whether it is from left side or right side.
They probably will not ask you to draw, but they probably will ask you to just explain. So there are two methods of the points, the subpoints. So you just need to know those ways of, especially at least in the hard region, they would expect you to know the ABCD subpoints and 1, 2, 3, 4 points, how to identify. At least that much they'll ask. Very unlikely that they'll ask you anything beyond the sixth point. Only in the heart region, the ABCD 4 subpoints and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. If you can correctly write about these, that should be sufficient.
And stages of ego, brother, and that also theoretically we can write like,
Stages
or
of
do we
ego
need to
freedom,
represent
definitely. That's one of the
circle?
commonest questions that you will ask. So we have discussed about it in the last session also, the four stages and the 11 circles. So there are quite a few of these things. These are all very commonly asked questions. So anyway, the stages of ego, we probably might come again in a different context as we go through the complete works. So you will have some revision. If you have already covered it, just revise it yourself.
Means no need to draw a circle and mark or something. Okay, thank you, brother.
We are only testing your spiritual thing. We are not testing your
Understand.
geometry. So don't worry about it.
Oh,
But please, you must be able to recall the equivalents. That is enough of different descriptions.
okay, thank you.
Ananta.
Thank you, brother. This question is about this human beings and the universe section, where it talks about the composition of a human being also is exactly the same as that of the universe. So is this true? Is this true only for human beings? I mean, there is so much in creation and so many realms.
Is it true for only human beings? Because, if you have a look at where Dajit explains these three bodies are in the Artness magazine, he says all of them have these three bodies. There is the level of consciousness is related to the flexibility or liability, how closely these are held together. Labile, that's the term he uses. So we have this consciousness at the mineral, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, and human level. So when we come to the human level, there is a kind of tipping point where we are crossing over into a domain where the process of evolution is by willing participation. That is one thing. Below that, it is automatic. Again, it seems beyond that, there is a kind of automatic process that kicks in. So that is one. So when you talk about in the context of what Babuji has written about, the parallel between the manifest universe being supported by subtler and subtler universes or planes of existence, and they are numerous. We also have similar, let us say, composition, he says. We are aware of these three main bodies of Sthula, Sushma, and Karana Shariras, but there are innumerable other ones which he calls them as coverings. So in this aspect, he is telling the human being as well as and the universe that we see have a similarity. That is why he says composition is similar or exactly same. The other point is, of course, we share the descent from the origin. That is there. And also the process of creation has made this manifest creation also as well. We are part of it. We are also existing in this thing. But at the same time, we have all these other bodies as well as the coverings. That is the understanding I have. But to come back to your question about whether it is applicable to other forms of life, they also have this is a moot question. Like, how do you answer that?
I think my perspective is sorry. Is that they might have that same level of circles, but I think in heartfulness way it was, or in initial chapter it was written that the human is the only one who has given that level of consciousness to unravel it to go back.
Yeah, that is what I discussed. But this question is, when you come to this, this is understood by all of us because Daji explains it and Babuji also explains about these aspects. But to come back to Ananta's question of composition of the universe, say composition of human being and composition of an animal kingdom, say tiger, lion, are they also not having these bodies, Sthula, Sushma, and other ones? They are also having, but the expression of the Sushma is very limited. That is the major difference in this. Second aspect is they are so closely held together. The labile aspect is almost missing. So, proportionate to that labileness, there is the level of consciousness. So, we have the now what our masters say, that willing participation can result in going to that finer and finer or accessing the finer and finer layers. Whereas in the animal kingdom and plant kingdom, that is not possible. It is only through a process of natural evolution.
So does it also mean about means the way I felt was about the Panchabhutas only? So that is the reason I didn't think anything else. But when you are speaking, a different dimension is what I'm not sure then whether I understood.
The Panchabhutas, if you ask, Daji's explanation of it in spiritual anatomy is really eye opener. He talks about, if you come from the scientific perspective, we will talk about, so many elements and, molecules and, the composite ones. And at least the mineral, if you go to Mendeleev's periodic table, you have maybe about 120 or so, isn't it? It is not limited to only these 5 elements or Panchabhutas. So when Daji describes, then he discusses this also, that aspect of scientific thing. And then he says, when we are talking about Panchabhutas, it is the essential characteristic of each of these. Say the solidity or the things like that, fire. So the transformative aspect of fire and things like that. When you talk about air, that, the fluid part of it. So that is how he says everything in the universe is composed of these Panchabhutas. Akasha or space is prevalent, and he gives the example of a cloud of soil. It has the air element, it has the fire element, because once you expose it to the sun, it becomes parched and it will transform into something else. So it is also having this solidity because it is having that solidity is that of earth element, isn't it? So that is how he says it is that essence part of it that is there. So that then all these Panchabhutas, our ancients have tried to encapsulate everything into the essence part. That is why they said these are the ones with which you can describe everything in the universe. A very, very different, it's a more of a holistic approach. Whereas in science, we are trying to break everything into, the components part, elements, the molecule, atoms, and, further into nuclear levels and subatomic particles. It goes on and on. It is the path of differentiation. Spirituality is the path of integration. Everything we are trying to go into a holistic attempt. Raghu brother, you want to elaborate?
Answer is very simple, yes. Question. To what extent they actually manifest differs.
Yeah.
That's all. Answer is everything. Even if you take a very single cell is also having the same 5 koshas that we look at it at a grosser level. So every cell has 5 koshas if you look at it. So the thing is, compared to all the creation, every aspect of creation has the same composition, but the extent to which it manifests varies. That's it. Man is only the being who is enabled to leapfrog with their willingness to go to a higher state than what would otherwise occur naturally. Because there are people who actually say, why should we practice anything at all?
Yeah.
We are happy with what we are doing. We are happy with the life that we have got. Where is the question of spirituality or any practice? Nothing wrong with that also. It is just that they would have got an opportunity to leapfrog, but it's just that they are not taking up the opportunity. That is a choice that we have to make at an individual level, which is why we are kind of talking about at the start of the meeting today, the start of the question and answer, that it is an individual choice. So every one of us have to make that individual choice. Every one of us have to make that individual journey. But as human beings, as a species, we are enabled to make that journey, leapfrog. That's why there is this song by Purandar Dasa. ಮಾನವ ಜನ್ಮ ದೊಡ್ಡದು ಇದು ಹಾಳ ಮಾಡಬೇಡಿ ಹುಚ್ಚಪ್ಪಗಳಿರ. So human life is a special one. Don't waste it, mad people. That's the literal English translation of the song. ಮಾನವ ಜನ್ಮ ದೊಡ್ಡದು ಇದ ಹಾಳು ಮಾಡಬೇಡಿ ಹುಚ್ಚಪ್ಪಗಳಿರ. So it's a very, very special. In fact, in the Viveka Chudamani,
Shankaracharya.
Shankaracharya says about
Durlabham
human birth
Trayameva.
being very special. That's one of the requirement for realization. And in Christianity also, it's written that from a religious perspective, God made man as a copy of himself.
Himself. That is there.
Okay. No, he doesn't talk about any other creature. Only man he made as a copy of himself. So whatever is there in nature, everything is there in man. To the extent that it can help us go back to the godly state. It's only in man it's kind of manifested to this extent, which enables us to go back to the journey from one life only. Of course, that is a discovery and invention of Babuji and Lalaji, that they have made it possible to go back within a part of one life. Otherwise, even just small part of the spiritual journey used to be taken as requiring many lives. So it's actually, if you just look at the enormity of the discoveries that Babuji and Lalaji has made, it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Anybody who reads the spiritual history, so to say, how people were actually going through so much austerity, so much penances, all these things, to make it accessible and available to every common man, wherever they are, and to make this journey possible in a shorter period of time with much lesser effort. I think that's a phenomenally, totally different path altogether. You can say it's a revolution. It's not an evolution. Till now, what we have had in spiritual history is like evolution. What this has now created is that if you look at it from the human history perspective, it's a revolution. It's a big breakthrough, so to say. It's almost like, if you want to give a scientific analogy for that, it's a kind of breakthrough that you can have versus normal science versus quantum that we are now entering into, the quantum field. So almost every aspect of our life is going to change the moment quantum physics kind of starts getting into our field, into our life. So it's a dimensional shift, so to say, because many laws of nature or physics do not apply in the quantum. So we need to rewrite the entire way that we are going to look at physics and how we are going to apply it in our life. So it's a dimensional shift. This particular method that we've got, Sahaj Manak, is a dimensional shift. No doubt about it. This has never happened in human history that spirituality was so easily accessible. Reality could be achieved in one life or even part of one life. So answer is very simple. Yes, the degree of manifestation is different. That's all.
Thank you, brother.
Murthy, brother.
Namaste, brother. So, like what Raghu brother was saying, each one individual experience, and he has to take the supersonic flight, and he is a pilot, and he has to experience it. Coming from naval aviation, I have had the experience of assigning the aircraft for the pilot to fly, but now I have to fly. So, in that parlance, I remember FOD, foreign object damage, and if that is reduced, the engine is safe and it is able to take off and fly. So here I just got hold of Babaji's one saying, at the beginning we feel, in the middle we observe, at the end we disappear. That is FOD for me. Feel, observe, disappear. In short, simple understanding. But as in Sahaj Marg, everything is invertendo. It's very, very simple, but at the same time, we make it complicated. So as long as you're trying to evolve, you're delaying it. When you allow the push, yield to the pull, and let go of you, you do not evolve, you disappear, and that remains. So, how we experience this understanding of our journey is what matters going ahead. I'll leave it at that. It's seemingly very easy task looking at it from the outside, but experience matters. And realization, as you are rightly discussing now, is dawning for all of us. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Brother Maheshwari. Maheshwari Gde.
Mahesh, ಮಾತಾಡ್ರಿ. Please talk.
Please unmute, I think.
Mahesh, we are not able to hear.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's unmuted now. There are no more questions. In the chat box also nothing is there. Okay, no questions.
Maheshwar Hegde has put some message here in the chat box. And the
Hello.
Uparati.
Yeah.
Now audible? Am I audible?
Yeah.
Somebody had asked this difference between Pratyahara and Uparati. Uparati is a effortless condition, which is in the third condition of in the sadhana chatusthaya, where it is effortless condition. But Pratyahara is in Ashtanga yoga, where Patanjali says it is the effortful. What to say? The person puts effort to withdraw his senses from withdraw himself from the senses, to prepare condition like for meditation, like dharana, dhyana. Is it?
We've already covered that, brother.
Oh, okay.
We have already covered that sufficiently. But whatever you said is also correct. We just saw that in your chat box. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Ajitesh, go ahead.
From the last session's question that you had asked about prayer and meditation, I was thinking around it. I don't have a very concrete answer. It seems like something is coming, but not something concrete. I was thinking meditation, I was drawing a parallel to probably exploring the depths of the consciousness or going within the heart, exploring new depths. And prayer as a mechanism to know the current depth and expand it there and feel connected in that aspect. And although you did say that we can achieve every spiritual condition while praying, I did not find an answer to that, but I was thinking in those terms, very simple. Because in meditation, what we are trying to do is going deep. In prayer, what we are trying to achieve is to connect or have that universal connect. That's what I'm feeling, and that when we have that universal connect, even the meditation becomes universal in a way. I don't know. These thoughts are coming new as I'm talking right now. But yeah, just like I don't know if you'll answer that question or you'll give more time. But yeah.
Good. Thanks for trying. See, the point of giving the questions is to help you develop the process of introspection. Now, you might get, depending on what is the kind of experience and the knowledge that you have developed, you will get different answers as you progress. So like this question about prayerful state, meditative state, and constant remembrance. They all seem to be there to be done all the time. Then you will be left wondering which one to do of the three. It's confusing, right? For anybody. So then you have to wonder when you experience the prayerful state, how is that state different from the meditative state? And then how is that state different from the constant remembrance? So these are all things, although it's one simple question, in order to answer this question, you have to experience all the three states. Then you will get such a clear answer that you will not have any confusion in your mind. But if you don't have this particular question, of course, you will be doing all the practices, but you will not know the nuances of where each one of these actually fit in, right? So that one question is kind of all encompassing: prayerful versus meditative state versus constant remembrance. Okay. Now, interestingly, the same question Sister Vidya had sent some answers. So let us hear from her what she actually picked up from.
I was just thinking that constant remembrance part. I remembered that in the beginning we were told we'll be in different stages of remembrance. When we start our practice, really we forget to remember Master. Then slowly we will try to remember. Then really we will be in that state of constant remembrance that even to forget him, we have to remember ourselves. So maybe that is like where you are staying in that constant remembrance for me. So it is the remembrance, like maybe it is more mental in the mind than in the heart. Means it is in the mind state, not in the feeling state. But in meditative state, somewhere I felt that mind where we rest on the heart will vibrate. I don't know, brother. This is what I felt. Vibrate along, like we have an ECG and an EEG, which vibrate together, and somewhere it will meet, so that remembrance becomes the meditative state. Then you are remembering, but still you are feeling with that remembrance. So the prayerful state, in prayer really, like what you told and what I read is, it is difficult to get oneness because there is always a person who is praying and the person who is praying for. There are two people. But in meditation, we can achieve oneness. But in prayerful state, it opens for that meditative state. Like it paves the path for meditative state. That's what I felt.
So part of the answer is given in Heartfulness Way book. Daji explaining about the prayer clearly says that prayer will not help you achieve oneness. It will not give you unity. Okay. In prayer, the duality is always there. So the giver, the receiver, and the act of praying, all these are there. So there is an element of duality intact, even at the highest level of prayer. Okay. But when it comes to meditation, that's one of the reasons why we actually do the prayer meditation in the night. We just don't simply pray and then go to sleep. We just do the prayer, then drift into meditation, and then gradually we go to sleep. That's one of the things. But even otherwise, if you look at prayer as a practice and meditation as a practice, that is the other question which I had given last time, is the relative importance of each of these things. Right? See, in the Pinda Pradesh, as we progress in the heart region, there are a lot of observations. See, Pinda Pradesh is full of our samskaras in a grosser form. Okay. Now, there are samskaras in the higher points also, but they are in a more subtler form. Since the Pinda Pradesh is full of grosser samskaras, one of the commonest experience that we have as we journey through the Pinda Pradesh points is that we have a lot of observations. Many people, when they actually ask them, you ask them about their experience of meditation, they'll give you a lot of sceneries, a lot of faces that they saw, a lot of visuals that they saw. It's kind of mainly visual based, so to say. So observations are predominant during the course of the journey through the Pinda Pradesh. Now, as we go towards the mind region, from the fifth, sixth point onwards, we become more sensitive towards the feelings. So that's the second part. We become more sensitive towards the feelings. We start picking up more finer feelings because now we are out of the bounds of the grosser Maya. Remember, we spoke about the Maya, the question last time around, the different stages of Maya. From the Pind Pradesh, the gross Maya is now down, out. So you're out of the influence of the gross Maya. So once you're out of the influence of the gross Maya, your sensitivity towards the feelings increases a lot. So you are able to catch finer nuances of meditation. Now look at it slightly from the prayer perspective. We keep telling you that you have to look at the prayer and then go behind to the meaning and then you have to go to the feeling. You remember that and then go to the vibration. So these are the four steps: the words, the meanings, the feelings, and the vibration. These are the four stages that you go through. Now, when do we actually really become sensitive towards the feelings? We just now spoke about it. We actually become sensitive towards the feelings only after we have crossed the fourth or fifth point. There is this sense, there is an enormous shift in the sensitivity, the subtlety and the sensitivity. They both go together because you are now rid of grosser samskaras, which are like bulk of the samskaras that you are carrying. Okay, so you are now more aware of the feelings, sensitive to feelings. Now, once you become sensitive to feelings, now go back to the practice of prayer. Don't you think it becomes naturally easy for you to actually feel when you do the prayer? It automatically happens because now you are actually sensitive to the feelings, both during the meditation, what you pick up, and when you are actually interacting with the people, you are more sensitive. Okay, so in terms of feeling, I don't know whether to share or not. I'll just yesterday night I had this premonition that our Vijay Kumar brother will be conducting the satsang in Banashankari and I'll be taking the sitting. So today morning when I went there, he actually conducted the sitting. So I was totally surprised. Yesterday I just felt it. It's almost so you actually become more and more sensitive towards the feelings. In fact, you actually start picking up things a lot more earlier than they actually manifest. Lot more earlier. That's why when we go into meditation and develop sensitivity to feelings, there are a lot of decisions, lot of time that we save. In fact, Daji also mentions that in order not to lose time in a business venture that you might eventually see that it doesn't work up, or in a relationship that might not end up that might end up not working. If you are sensitive to the feelings, you can actually pick it up a lot more early than when it manifests. So when we actually progress to that stage where we are more sensitive naturally to feelings, the prayer actually becomes a lot more important. Now look at it. In prayer, what do? We establish ourselves in the relationship of God being the master, we being the servant. That's the kind of relationship that we establish. Now, typically, the thing that the prayer does is it actually makes you develop humility. When you actually take somebody as the master and you being the servant, you actually start gradually developing a state of surrender. So surrender and humility are two things that actually develop pretty well, pretty fast when we actually do the prayer meditation in the right way, going behind the feelings. You remember the feeling of love and devotion, the supplicancy and other things. And what is the concept that you are actually taking of God to be? We in prayer, it's very clearly written by Babaji that God is the master and we are his serf or the servant. So you remember there is one beautiful song written by Tyagaraja. People who love Carnatic music might probably know about it. Bantu Riti Koluvu Iyavaya Rama. You know the Telugu song? It's a Carnatic music song. Bantu Riti Koluvu. Bantu means Banta. Banta is being a servant. So it's typically referring to Hanuman. Hanuman was Rama's Banta. That's what we say. Banta means the right hand. What we in common language say, the right hand of this person. For everything and anything, they actually depend on this person. So they are called as Banta. Okay. So Bantu Riti Koluvu. Koluvu means work. So please give me a work where I can be like your servant. Iyavaya Rama means please give me. To he is addressing to Lord Rama. So it's a very beautiful song. That's exactly what we're actually doing when we do the prayer. We firm up that relationship of him being the master and we being the servant. Now, this starts from around the fourth point. If you remember, fourth point is the seed of humility. I'm now quoting from the spiritual anatomy. The seed of humility. Now, that seed of humility now gradually becomes more stronger and it starts germinating as we grow out of the heart region. Once we grow out of the heart region, we are out of the bounds of the gross maya, so that seed starts flowering or it kind of germinates. Now, the seed actually gives you the fruit in the 12th point. That's where you have reached the peak of humility. The peak of love, humility, purity, and simplicity, all the four are there in the 12th point. Now, prior to that, we have the 8th point. So, remember, as far as humility is concerned, 4, 8, and 12. So, fourth point is the seed of humility, 8th point is the point of surrender, 12th point is when the humility peaks. This is the sequence in which we actually progress. Now, for the humility to develop, for the surrender to develop, what is it supposed to happen in the mind region? You have just now read about all the different regions in the reality at dawn. What is there in the mind region essentially?
Ego.
11 circles of ego. Without the 11 circles of ego getting refined, there is no question of you developing humility or surrender. That's not going to be possible. So, in other words, the more kind of higher we go in the Pinda Pradesh or the heart region, the more important prayer becomes. If you ask somebody who's in the first point to feel intensely about the prayer, they will find it pretty much very difficult because they're covered with all samskaras. That's like saying that my glass is covered with dust, and then I'm asking that person to focus intently through that glass. Now, however much I might ask that person to focus intently on that through that glass, even if we were to try it, we probably will find it difficult. Now, only when I have actually cleaned the glass to a certain extent, and then you ask them to focus and feel more, they'll be in a better position to do it. That's exactly what happens during the course of the journey in the heart region. We become more sensitive, more subtle. That enables and that increases the importance of doing the prayer in the proper way. So, if at all anybody wants to do a quicker journey in the mind region, the one of the things that they have to practice is the prayer. It is of lot more importance because in the Pinda Pradesh, what is more important is the cleaning because we are full of gross samskaras. There is no question of sensitivity, subtlety, none of those are there. You are still kind of journeying, and then it's the push of the master that actually helps you in the Pinda Pradesh. Of course, there is a lot of self effort that is also required in the Pinda Pradesh. But as you go to the mind region, it is the pull from the higher condition that actually pulls you towards the next point. So it is more of a push in the Pinda Pradesh and more of a pull in the higher states. And there, the more we let go of the ego, the more faster we actually journey through the mind region. Okay, so there is nuances in the way that each of these processes work. Although we practice all the three, but then there are quite a bit of a nuance. In the Pinda Pradesh, cleaning is a lot more important because without that, there's no question of sensitivity, subtlety, nor the progress. And of course, master help is also absolutely necessary. In fact, what you realize through the course of this journey is that master's help is necessary at every stage of our progress. Without his journey, without his energy, without his backing, it's very difficult for us to progress, also very difficult for us to stay where we are. Forget about progressing further. Even to stay where we are, we require his support. So, secondly, the meditation is something that can start from the first point and it takes you up to the center and merger with the center. So, that is like the thing which encompasses everything. That's why, whenever we talk about heartfulness, what's the first thing that we talk about? We talk about the meditation. That's something that covers the entire realm of our journey from the first point up to the center. The last thing that we talk about is the prayer. The prayer is the same sequence. First day we do the meditations, second day we do introduce them to cleaning, third day we introduce them to prayer. That's the sequence that we do. That's kind of the same sequence which we also evolve in terms of the importance. Meditation is something that you have to know the nuances of thoroughly to be able to benefit out of meditation. Secondly, you do the cleaning so that things becomes more subtler and more cleaner, and we develop that ability to start feeling better. Then, with the help of the feeling, we now utilize the prayer as a tool to progress faster. So, the answer to the question that we asked in the last session is that there are certain nuances in the way that you progress. Although you practice all the three, the implications or the impact of each of the three will be different as we progress through different stages of our journey. Okay, Arun Kumar.
Brother. In realization topic, we discussed so many things: Maya, Century, human beings, universe, and sadhana, chatushta in different contents. But my question is, really, realization happens depends on soul condition by birth or depends on the physical sadhana? Because soul is a superpower.
Soul is a superpower, but it has come down to earth with lot of coverings. So it is not the physical sadhana, it is the spiritual sadhana. When the soul comes down, it might not necessarily have the awareness of what is possible. It comes down, most of the times the soul comes down to get rid of some amount of samskaras. So the fundamental reason why any soul takes birth is only one thing, which is to get rid of some of the samskaras. In other words, to become lighter. Suppose when it comes down here and then it realizes that there are a lot of other things that it can do to evolve faster to its original condition, then it takes up that method and you start doing your spiritual sadhana. Okay. Now, we are not talking about people who are born for a specific purpose, avatara purushas or special personalities. They are coming down to us for a specific piece of work. It could be Lalaji, Babuji, Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. They have all come down for a specific purpose. Even Lord Krishna, Lord Rama, they had a very specific purpose for which they came. So, but if you take them away, most of the people, common people, they already always come for the sake of shedding off some of the samskaras and going to a higher level of existence. But once the soul becomes aware of a possibility that it can go far higher than what it had actually originally come for, and then it actually picks up that method and start doing the spiritual sadhana. It's not the physical sadhana, because physically you are just sitting at one place. It is the spiritual sadhana, internal journey, that is what enables the soul to go all the way up to the center from where it has come. Okay. So all the things, although appears too many of these topics, the simple answer to your question is that if you do the practices correctly, all these things will unfold itself. That's the simplest answer to your question. So don't get too bogged down about all these things. It is necessary for you to know so that if somebody were to ask you, you should be in a position to at least say a few things. To that extent, it's necessary. To some extent, for examination, it's necessary. But in terms of the unfolding, it's a continuous journey. It's a dynamic journey. Let it unfold at its own pace. But our job is to practice regularly. That's all. Okay, Rima sister.
Namaste, brother. Brother, my question is where, Babuji says the innermost center or zero of man's existence and that's of God's manifestations really the same. Realization of God means the same as realization of self and vice versa. So, brother, is it related to Aham Brahmasmi, something that concept? Because that's what we keep on hearing, lot from other sects also. That Brahman is there inside and we are the same with it.
Realization of the self and see, you remember the last time that we spoke about the Aham Brahmasmi and then all from Brahman and then all is Brahman, all from Brahman, the three stages. We start with individuality, and that is clearly written in heartfulness way that it is not Brahman that we are aiming for. So that should be very clear. We are not aiming for Brahman.
Okay.
Individual has three bodies, Brahman also has three bodies. So when we say that we have to go towards the center, we have to cross the three bodies that we have got, and we have to cross the three bodies that Brahman has got to be able to reach the center. Our job is not to reach for Brahman. If that is the case, then by coming to Brahmanda Mandala, you are touching the Brahman. So the journey should end there. The journey does not end there. In fact, that is the start of the Brahman's physical body, the Virat region. Okay, so that being the case, that is not the end of the journey. So there are three individual bodies and there are three Brahmans bodies. Of course, the only difference is this. Brahman will not come and tell us, this is my body, this is my mind, this is my soul. It will not say that. We have differentiated based on our individuality, and from where we have come things into two parts. One is the Brahman component, where is the universal component, and there is one, the Atman component, where there is an individual component. So if you look at it from the individual versus universality perspective, that makes it very easy. So for us to go towards the center, you have to go beyond the concept of individuality, beyond the concept of universality, and then exist there. That is the center that you are actually going towards. If you are going to stay in the level of universality and not reach the center, that is not the highest that we are actually aiming for. In our system, you remember, we also spoke about in a different way, we have to go beyond Saguna, Nirguna, and beyond that. We have to go beyond Sakara, Nirakara, and beyond. Likewise, we have to go beyond individual, universal, and then beyond. So that highest state is where all these concepts is now gone. The highest state, the complete knowledge, is that state where there is complete ignorance reigning. So just for the practical purpose, just take a newborn baby. Does it have a concept of individual? Does it have a concept of universal? Does it have any concept at all? All concepts needs to end before we actually reach the center. That is when we can be said to have reached the center. So we have to go beyond the universal and beyond the individual in order that we can actually reach the center. Okay, so please do not take, there are many Upanishads which talk about Atman as the highest, and there are many Upanishads which also talk about Brahman as the highest. Okay, so that sometimes can be very confusing. That's the reason why when we say that Babaji and Lalaji have done revolution, they have given so much clarity about all these concepts. Because if you take spiritual history of human, people used to take moksha as the goal. People used to take liberation as the goal, mukti as the goal. People used to take universality or universal consciousness as the goal. People used to take cosmic intelligence as the goal. People used to take self-realization as the goal. And now I'll come into the today's question. In one context, Babaji said today in this chapter of realization that God realization and self-realization is one and the same. But if you read spiritual anatomy and if you read the region of the central region and the journey through the central region, you will realize that they are not one and the same. Okay. Now, obviously, from whatever perspective we spoke about, it appears as one and the same. No doubt about it, because we all come from the same origin. So in that way, if we go to our center, then we have gone to the center from where we all came. But if you actually look at the spiritual anatomy, I want you people to just read that part, the 12th point and the 13th point. I want you to read these two parts and then come back with this answer. In what ways they are different? In one context, it is same. In a different context, it is different. In what context is it different? So that is your homework for the next session. And this time I made it very easy also. I've given you the book also. I've told you what to read also. Okay. So please read through that.
Okay. I think no more questions.
No more questions, but one hand is there. Murthy is.
No, I think he's lowered his hand.
Yes, brother. I just want to see, all said and done, we are from the land of Bharat and the land of Sanatana Dharma. We always have a leaning back to the traditions. And even Daji recently launched Adi Shakti Parvam, right? So it always piggybacks on something of our tradition, whether it is relevant or not to the outside world, definitely relevant to the people in India. So I think that's there in our DNA. Whether we like it or not, we simply follow that. And how do we simply roughshod and say, no, 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 that is not correct. This is the only right thing. There lies in the problem because many of the people have different beliefs and customs and traditions, and they've been following that for ages. And I feel personally, it's a very wrong thing to say anything against their beliefs or traditions. And only the meditation or cleaning part can take care of it, but it has got a timeline. Only time will tell.
In order to answer your question, just because we elucidated the spiritual history with which it has evolved, it doesn't mean to say that we are criticizing this or that. If we say that physics has evolved through Newton, through Einstein, and now we are going towards quantum, that doesn't actually decrease the importance or relevance of all those people who have actually contributed for humans to evolve. This is again a point that is made in heartfulness way very clearly by Daji, that spirituality for human evolution is also kind of evolving. We are going through that. Now, when we look at the history of anything, we are not criticizing. We are only saying that these are the paths with which we have actually evolved. That is, history is there for every subject. In fact, the psychiatry has a history, architecture has a history. So, just because we are actually elucidating the kind of steps that we have gone through, we should not look at it as criticism. All that we actually spoke about was in the context of what is possible through the system that we are practicing, provided we actually set our eyes for that and not to kind of get bogged down by some of these things that we have actually discussed. I think we probably will be doing the right thing. But it's important to understand the history to which we have come. If somebody wants to understand what they are today, if they do not look at their own life about the past, they will probably not be able to make out what they are today. Right? So now just because we are looking at the past, it's not that we are criticizing our past. In fact, we actually accept every mistake that we have made in the past, and from there we learn and evolve. Okay, just because we have mentioned about the Atman or the Brahman being taken as the highest, or the Mahat as being taken as the highest, or universal consciousness being taken as the highest, that is no criticism. That was the highest that they could access at their point of time in life, in their evolution. Now we have a different possibility that is kind of given up by nature, by God, and by our hierarchy of masters. So let us actually look at it as a possibility that we can actually evolve to the highest. That's all it is. For example, 300, 400 years back, we did not have treatment for many of the infectious diseases that we have got. Now, that doesn't mean to say that they were not having any knowledge and we have more knowledge. At that stage of evolution, they had their knowledge. At our stage, we have knowledge. For example, 30 years back, we did not have treatment for cancers. So there are many people who died 30 years back because of cancer. There are many people who died because of heart attack, because there was no emergency treatment. But now people don't die of cancer or heart attack so easily because we have treatment available. We have to accept each of the stage of evolution of man pragmatically as they were. Now, just because we quote them doesn't mean to say that we are criticizing them. Now, we will be quoted 30 years down the line by the next generation. Now, that doesn't mean to say that they are criticizing us. We always evolve with what we have got at the present moment in time. That's all. Okay. So, observation is not criticism. Let there be clarity of day between the two. Observation is observation and criticism is criticism. There is no criticism here. It's only observation. And Babaji, in fact, Daji himself write about all these things in the heartfulness way. That even now, spirituality is evolving. What we have got as a tools might be different to what might be available, say 30, 50 years down the line, 100 years down the line. Who has drawn a final line and said that this is all that the spirituality is going to evolve? There is no final line for anything. That's why Babaji writes about towards infinity. We are evolving towards infinity. All that we are doing is whatever we are actually getting that from there, we are trying to incorporate that into our real life. All the ideas, scientific ideas, are born in a lab, in someone's mind. Eventually, they percolate, work their way through the system, and they become part of our life. That's all that we are doing. Exactly the same process we are following as far as spirituality is concerned. Okay, Satyanarayana, we saw your message about recordings. Recordings are there in the YouTube unlisted category. Okay.
Unlisted category.
Uh,
No, because I
one or two
tried
recordings.
to find in your names, this one and all, it was not there and all. That's
If you
it.
want to,
No, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Murthy's this one observation, brother. 2000 years ago, Kalidasa had the courage to tell Purana Mityeva Nasadu Sarvam, Tatapi Sarvam Navamitya Vadyam. All that is old is not gold, and all that is new is not also shit. So, wherever it is there, it has to be experimented, experienced. And elaborately, Upanishads say it is the experience which will count much more than what is there in the theory. So probably that will answer, this question, just because, and probably in Sanatana Dharma, how much criticism is there for the previous things is nowhere else is there. It could be called blasphemy in any other religion or dharma, but in our religion or our Hindu Sanatana Dharma, it is always welcome. See, they go to a Radhanta and finally come to a Siddhanta. So that is where probably, the vote to discern is a birthright for every Sanatani. So we try to differ and then, okay, after reasoning and all, if you go to any Vakyartha Sabhas, the first thing is they will be in polar, bipolar. And from there, they will come to a point of consensus. Okay, I also have some of the points which, yes, these things were told, just like Shet Chakras were told in the normal course, Shet Chakras are told, and that is the highest in the. But as you go in another Upasana and all, there are 13 chakras. And 13th chakra inside is that just like our Brahmanda Mandal, there also 13 chakra is described. And from there, just before that, just like we have our master who can push us into that or swing us and into that Brahmanda Mandal, there is one goddess in charge of that. So such assumptions are there. Maybe, they were in a very, another, not so confirmed stages or, practically they were not experienced. And probably that is the reason why it is not so popular. But I was surprised when I was all along thinking that it's only Shet Chakras. But when I made a different study, it says 13 chakras. In another Upasana method, it is there. So probably, what Babuji, and even, what our friend should accept is what Lalaji said, that only, there, Satyapat, then, it was contradicted and it was improved upon by Babuji. So we should not take it in that particular this one that we are offending. That's my point of view.
anyway,
So to the conclusion, I thought, I was wondering when I was preparing the slides, there might be questions related to Maya. We have, if you remember, these 5 stages of Maya, vis-a-vis what Babuji says, Maya is the godly creative power or energy which has given rise to this manifest universe. We have to contemplate on this.
No, Krishna also says, Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratjaya.
No, but in the context of the outermost 5 circles of Maya of the heart region, he specifically says stages of Maya. And here, when he is talking about the parallelism, and before that, he talks about Maya, he says it is the godly energy which has given rise to this entire creation. And a lot of people, try to discredit everything by saying Maya is something askew. But he is talking about a very different aspect of it. So I was puzzling over this. I didn't have a clear answer on what is in this context of heartfulness approach. So I was thinking maybe some question will come. Nobody has asked that, so I am asking that now.
No,
Maybe
the
something you have to
question,
contemplate on.
the question on Maya has gone for Maya.
Maya Vida.
See,
Everything
2
is
points.
Maya.
1 minute. See, neither Babaji denounces mind. He
Yes,
says that is the instrument with which you evolve. Nor he denounces Maya. He also says that's a godly power that you can actually make use of for your evolution.
yes,
He actually does not denounce anything that is there in creation. Everything he says, if you use it appropriately, you can use for your evolution. Okay, that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. Second thing, which I think they also kind of, I was also surprised that they didn't pick up on this, is Babuji had used the word concentration for samadhi. So I think you did put that slide and also you put the word
that is
concentration.
where we stopped. The Samadhi part is where we stopped.
Yes, stages
So,
of concentration. Stage of concentration.
stages of concentration, he writes, rather than stages of, what do you say, samadhi. Okay, so just keep that in mind. That don't get confused. Sometimes they might ask the question of stages of concentration. This is something that you need to ponder in the exams. Okay, so if they're coming from CWRC and they talk about stages of concentration, that probably they're asking about the samadhi. If they are not asking directly about samadhi, they're saying asking 3 stages of concentration, then you need to kind of pick up that clue that this is the other word that Babaji has used in the context of samadhi. Just keep that in mind. Okay. Otherwise, we would confuse the concentration with the normal meaning of concentration that we have got. Okay. Karthik.
Hello.
That's what our master discusses in the meditation
Thankful.
chapter Ekagata.
Thankful.
Yeah. Karthik.
Yes, sir.
One minute,
Good
1
evening,
minute,
brothers.
sir. Vijay, finish. Vijay Kumar. You're saying something.
No, in the context of concentration, I was saying Master discusses about this aspect in the chapter meditation and heartfulness, where he talks
Correct.
about effort and focus. That is
Correct.
that concentration, what most of us understand as.
Exactly. So sometimes it might be confusing when they ask about concentration. Just be kind of clear what exactly are they asking. Okay. There, Daji has not described 3 stages of concentration. Right? So if they ask you 3 stages of concentration, it's likely to be about the samadhi, and they'll probably give you the book CWRC. Then it will be easy for you to remember. Okay. Karthik, go ahead now.
Hello. Hello. Yes. Good
Go ahead.
evening, brothers. Good evening, everybody. Actually, brother, what I feel now, this is all lot of intellectualization. This. Actually, what I personally feel is until and unless you don't experience it, you don't eat the mango, no, you're just describing, discussing, doing everything, beating around the bush, no. So that's my personal take on that. So again, Raghu brother, any tips to reach the as fast as possible? That's all. Anyway, thank you. That was just my this thing. If I
No
have
problem.
offended anybody, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean that.
No, it's all
Thank
right.
you very much.
Yeah, I think we should not go towards the direction of getting too, what do you say, iffy or sensitive about offending this or that. I think we just need to openly share, but we just need to understand the right context in which certain things are being discussed. That's all. Nothing else. Okay. So it's already 10:45, I think. Half of the people have dropped off and gone to sleep. So thank you for the rest of for staying with us and being with us awake. Okay.
For giving
So
company.
we will catch up again on Tuesday
Tuesday.
evening at
We'll
8
conclude.
o'clock as usual. Okay. Thanks for your time and attention
Thank you.
and for all the joint learnings. Okay.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
Good night.
Namaste.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.